So in this video, I'm going to go over some of my works in progress at the moment for the month of September. I haven't been too well this month, so I haven't done an awful lot of actual weaving, but I've managed to do sort of bits and bobs, so we'll go through those. Last time I was talking about it, I was going to order some white yarn so that I could do some dyeing, but I decided to try it with this kind of creamy yarn that I already have, which I know is mostly cotton. I don't know if there's anything else with it. A friend gave it to me, but it's absolutely beautiful, soft yarn with, I think it's 2-ply, pretty sure it's 2-ply, and it's got what seems to be sort of a darker yarn, or a thinner yarn at least, twisted around it, which makes it really interesting when dyed. So I've done some dyeing. So I had a go also at dyeing this recycled cotton, really thick yarn. That was quite interesting, although it got extremely taffled up and was a bit of a nightmare to untaffle, but that's come out really nice and it's sort of variegated. What I wanted to do is to have a go at dyeing a warp, and for some reason, instead of actually binding a warp and then dyeing that, I decided to do it as skeins. And the idea was that I was going to use the skein and then make the warp twice the length of the skein, so that then I could just, wind it twice the length on the warping board. But for some reason, it's very difficult to get it exact. What I was hoping for is to keep the sort of batches of colour together in the warp, but what I ended up with is very variegated warp. So this is one of the warps. I've done another one that I've woven with, which we'll have a look at in a minute. I mean, I really like this, so I'm going to see how that goes. But I think with this one that I've got left that was dyed in the muck, it's quite grungy colours. I'm actually going to try something different and try cutting it somewhere, so I've got a long length, and then using that as the warp and maybe tying it onto a dummy warp. So we'll see how that goes. I dyed some extra yarn, these are just some of them, to go with some of the dyed warps so that I could have some wefts. And I also dyed, I wanted to just have a random go at dyeing yarn when it's actually in a chain. So I had a go at that. That was a complete experiment. I think it's going to come out quite cool. I have unchained it. Is unchained it a word? I have unchained it and rechained it, so you can see more white in there than there was when I dyed it. But I think it's going to be quite it's basically like tie dyeing, but you're using the chain as the resist instead of the ties. So I've actually got 2 of these chains, both a bit different. So I'm going to have a go at using those as a warp for some plain weave, see how that goes. And I had a bit of dye left over, so I had to go at a little bit of shibori, which came out really nice and bright. That's a raspberry dye colour, I think, which is gorgeous. And I dyed a bit of extra in the avocado. I think I'm going to need a lot more than that. But yeah, I'm going to experiment with that. I think also with these warps, what I might do is dye like a dark red, sort of slightly pinky, but not as pink as this. I think that might make it quite an interesting warp colour, so that's my plan for those. And with the other warp that I already put on the loom, the first one that I'd dyed in the first dyeing video, I wanted to have a go at doing some samples because I've never done a proper sample before. So this was the first sample, and I used some hand dyed black, which is actually slightly grey in compared to the sort of commercially dyed black. And I had a go at doing, I think it's bird's eye twill to start with. And then I was also messing about with how hard to beat it, because it's something I'm still trying to get used to. So I was beating it a bit too hard to start with, and then it a bit too loose, and then it came out, just okay. So, and then on the second sample, I wanted to have a go with the commercially dyed. This is actually mercerized black yarn, and it's much more bold, so there's much more sort of separation. It doesn't merge as much with the hand dyed yarn. And it was going okay to start with, and then I tried this kind of a wavy pattern, but then I realised I had quite a lot of threading errors. So I decided I'd make this another sample so that I could basically cut it off the loom, and I ended up having to rethread it all. So I rethread it, and I decided I'm just going to do a tabby weave for this one, so that I could really have a play with the warp. So what I did, this is the result. Let's see if I can hold it up so you can see all the colours. So I use a rust coloured dye for the top section, and the sort of black, I need to wet finish it and cut off the ends, and then more of the rest, and then I use this olive green colour. There is a mistake in here that I need to fix. I made quite a few mistakes, so I did quite a lot of unweaving. But you can probably see here I've got 2 picks that are the same instead of different, so I need to sort that out before I wet finish it. But it's a bit too short for, I was hoping it would be, I'd have enough left for a scarf, but that was extremely naive, and so I'm not really sure what to do with it at the moment. So I could do with your ideas. So put in the comment section what you think I should do with this yarn. And yeah, I could do with some ideas. So what other things have I been messing about with? So I also had a little play with the braider. So I got, this is the box it came in. I got it off eBay, secondhand. I think it's secondhand, maybe new. But yeah, quite a lot more difficult than I thought. I don't know whether other people have this problem, but the hooks were sometimes getting a bit stuck, so it wasn't always that easy to kind of add the yarns into it. But there's a bit of a knack as well, I found, as to how tight to wind it. So I did sort of different tightnesses, and I think this first one's probably the best because it goes tight all the way to the top, and that's what you want really. But yeah, you sort of twist 2 together, and then or you twist 2 separately and then you twist them together. So yeah, definitely a knack to follow with that. So I'm quite glad I had a bit of a practice. It'd be interesting to see what they're like when they're wet finished. So yeah, so that's the samples. And speaking of wet finishing, I've wet finished my previous fabrics that I made, the little pieces, and I used the Laura Fry method that I saw on the School of Sweet Georgia. Now, I probably should have done a bit more research as to wet finishing, but she really seemed like she knew what she was talking about, and I'm sure she does. The warp yarn that I'd use with this is linen and wool, so it shrunk a lot. I mean, the wet finishing technique that Laura Fry uses is a lot of bashing, a lot of agitation, and it's very rough. So it's more like one of those traditional wool blankets that's really quite rough, which, you know, has its place, and it does look good. And I think I like how it feels when it's got another yarn through it that's maybe sort of bulky acrylic or something like that, that takes that itch away a little bit. So I'm still going to use this piece as the book cover, but I don't think I'm going to use this for the inside because it is a bit too scratchy. I'm going to try different wet finishing techniques. So with the cotton wet finishing, I really just washed it very gently, because I don't necessarily want it to lose all the definition of the pattern, but I do want it to hold together as fabric. So I think I'm going to try that again next time I use the wool and linen, because I do definitely want to use that. And if it's still a bit scratchy, I might just not wet finish it, to be honest, and use it as it is. So yeah, but I think some pieces of it, like I say, if it's got quite a bulky yarn in the weft, they've still come out quite nice. But yeah, they shrunk a lot. And also I learnt, based on this, that actually it's better to wet finish it and then stitch it and then cut it, rather than stitching it, cutting it, and then wet finishing it, because it's quite vigorous and will come apart. But I'm going to do a video once I've done a bit more wet finishing. I'm going to do a video on what I've learnt about wet finishing. So that is it for this month. I want to, well, basically my next plan really is to fix this error in this, and then I want to have a go at using the warp, the yarn waste that's still on the loom, to attach this warp, so it's using it as a dummy warp, and then maybe do some tabby weave with this, although I will need to do some more dyeing because I haven't got much in the way of yarn in these colours. But it's amazing how, you know, these really the same colours, it's just how, you know, how it's come out really. It's quite fascinating, the differences. So yeah, so that's my plan for next month. Be great to hear what you've been getting up to, what sort of projects you're doing with your weaving, and if you've had a go at dyeing and how that came out. And what I'll do is link in the video. I'm still working on some of the videos, so this is a little bit of a sneak peek really, but I will put the first dyeing video in as a link in the description if you want to check that out.